Виола Анатольевна, вы подключились, да? О, Майкл, Кайл. Oh, so as I see, we can check all systems. Hi, Ken. I see you. Kyle.
Vladimir.
Celia.
Hi, Celia.
Nice to see you.
Hi, Kyle.
Okay, so I can hear, I see you. Everything is working well. So just wait till meeting time, and we will start. Okay.
Okay. Владимир, слышно меня? Звук проверим.
Да, Виола,
Раз.
все хорошо, я вас слышу.
Замечательно.
So, good evening, afternoon or morning.
Good evening, glad to see you.
Let's start. Um, so this is a new broadcast, School of Instructors, where we discuss issues from university staff and professors on the transition to remote forms of education. Please find below this video link to a archive of recordings of our previous broadcasts. But frankly speaking, all of them right now are in Russian. My name is Vladimir, and today I'm planning to moderate the discussion. The topic for today is organization of distance or remote learning in Russian, Irish, UK, and US universities. We have too many questions to discuss, so let me introduce our speakers. They are real experts in the field of online learning and organizational issues. So, Mrs. Viola Larionova, Deputy Vice-Rector for Educational Activities at Ural Federal University. Okay. Mr. Kyle Thompson, Senior International Student Advisor and Orientation Coordinator in the Indiana University Office of International Services. Kyle, hi.
Hello.
Hello. Mr. Ken Brown, Master in Control Systems and E-Learning, Lecturer in School of Engineering, Letterkenny Institute of Technology, Ireland. Hello. And Mrs. Celia O'Hagan is an expert on online pedagogy and leadership, Senior Lecturer in Teacher Education, Stranmillis University College, a college of Russell Group University, Queen's University. Hello. So I propose organizing the meeting today in a discussion format. So I have questions, I ask them. If you have questions, don't hesitate to voice them. And I would like to start with short questions and brief answers for all of us. So first question. When did the changes in educational process due to Corona begin? So maybe Kyle, please start.
Yeah, I can start. And I don't want to forget my colleague, Dave Cooley, who is also with Indiana University in the School of Informatics, and Computer Information. It's a very long name now. What is the full name, Dave?
It gets longer every year. We're the Luddy School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering.
Yes. So he's an expert in classroom technology at Indiana University, more so than I am. So he is here to give all the technical expertise that I cannot. So yeah, when did this all start? For us, we started seeing a transition. The first impact we saw was on February 2nd, when the US started imposing travel restrictions on students from China, which is of course a big population for us. Fortunately, that was a few weeks after our spring semester began. So everyone was already here for the semester that they needed to study. At the beginning of February, we started organizing our office to be prepared to work from home remotely if needed. I think March 6th was the first case of COVID-19 in the state of Indiana, where we're located in the US. March 10th, the university announced that we were going to remote education through at least April 5th. We were working remotely from our offices by March 16th. And then right about that same time, the university announced that we would actually be doing remote education through the rest of our current semester, which ends in May.
Okay, so thank you, Kyle. Maybe Ken could continue. So when changes started due to Corona at your university?
Our timeline was quite similar to Kyle's timeline. The initial changes were being discussed during February, but nobody really knew what to expect. And it was only with the government announcing the actual requirement for students not to be in college anymore during March that everything closed with us. So it was around about, say, the 10th of March as well, whenever we started to shut down the students coming to the college. And we were then informed that we would have to engage with the students remotely, but there were no policies in place to actually state what remote meant, and there was a lot of confusion between the words used, such as remote and online, and so many people, many students, they had never studied online before, and so on, and so it was quite a shock for them. And then we were also informed that not only were we to engage with students online in a remote fashion, but that also all assessments, which normally take place during May, the terminal examinations, that they would also be delivered online and remotely. And again, this was something outside of our area of expertise for the majority of students. And so it caused quite a bit of confusion and anxiety, not just for ourselves, but also for the students as well. And so we're still waiting on information from the government, because we have a closure for another 3 weeks, but we don't know what happens after that. So in terms of policies, strategies, and so forth, no, it's really been ad hoc, and as things develop, try and adapt to it as best you can.
Thank you for answer. So maybe Mrs. Viola could comment how it happened at our university, Ural Federal.
Okay, thank you for the word. I would say that we met this situation in March. We had 1 week to prepare to the transition of the educational process in online mode. It lasted from the 15th of March to 23rd of March. And then after 23rd of March, we canceled all the classes, full-time classes, and transfer them to online environment. Then in a week we have 1 week holiday, but it helped us to make a more preparatory job for fully transition. And from that, after that, all classes were transferred online, and all teachers and lecturers conduct their lectures online. We choose scenarios to conduct lectures and practical training online, and students assessment. And we are a very big university. We have 35,000 students. That's why it took us approximately from 2 to 3 weeks to mobilize all our efforts and to transfer. Now we have a permanent educational process. Our staff and lecturers have technical support, but the entrance to the university is forbidden for all except administration. Some people who can't do their job without entering the university. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in Russia, the situation started a bit later. So in America in February, here in Russia in March, after 14 March. and it's approximately 1 month we have remote experience of education. Okay, and maybe Mrs. Celia could tell a bit about situation in UK universities.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for the invite. Yeah, I mean, I am actually based in Northern Ireland, on the border areas or not too far from Caen. But typical of Great Britain and universities, we have obviously very similar stories to what you've heard from some of the very large universities. Queen's University would regulate the college that I work in, but we're a teacher education college, so pedagogy is our focus. So we had a real crisis because we had students out in schools spread across the whole of Northern Ireland. And that when they're out in schools, they're on placement basically, or what we call Northern Ireland school-based work. So all of that work was crucial to their assessment. And now we obviously moving online and developing an e-pedagogy is not new to us because we have online master's degrees like lots of the larger universities will have. But our staff who run the undergraduate programs, quite a significant program, would not be as familiar with the platforms, and they would use blended learning and support models, but they wouldn't be used to 100% online. So this was a very big challenge. Queen's University, in line with the rest of education in Ireland, of course, because we're cross-border, and also with Great Britain, they had policies very quickly. And so we've been following their lead. Sadly, in Northern Ireland, it has been a couple of weeks behind what probably should have happened. I don't know if that's typical everywhere else. Our schools were late to close. Our students were on the ground, our staff were on the ground. And so with that lateness then came a very big crisis. The crisis, however, has been managed excellently by staff. I sit in a teacher education college with about 1,000 students, alongside a small cohort of staff, but we're within a bigger university framework. And so there's 25,000 students at Queen's, to give you a sense, but we're across a whole city. And subsequently, our students, it wasn't that difficult for us, being on the smaller side, to move to an online modality. We use Canvas, probably known to most people. It's the newest version of Blackboard that many of us will know. And like many of you, I've lived through lots of different virtual learning environments. We have a library integrated and things like that. So it was not that difficult to move online, but a challenge for staff and students who are used to working on the ground. No less challenge than has already been described.
Okay, so thank you. It was interesting. And you partially start answer for my second question. Was your university be ready for this situation? I know that Kyle wrote me that American universities have some scenarios of situation like this one. So was this process prepared in advance for a situation like this? Could you tell something if you want, if you have this experience?
I can start to address that. Yeah, at least I can't speak for all American universities, but we have a team that sort of goes through and looks for these things in advance. An emergency management and continuity team that meets regularly, that develops plans for many different contingencies. All of them probably not anything that anybody looks forward to, from terrorist attacks to shootings to infectious disease. So for each of those things, there is a outline plan and some resources and information for faculty, staff, and students for those different scenarios. We have a program on campus called the Keep Teaching, which was an initiative prepared in advance for any situation like this, that was up and running to give instructors specifically resources on how to shift their courses and teaching to online resources, including just strategies and the resources for using those. And I can give you a quick, if I can do a quick screen share, I can just kind of give you a glance of what those resources look like. That's successful. We have the Keep Teaching website where you can see there are some strategies for how to communicate with students in such a contingency, resources on how to teach, including, we've already mentioned Canvas. Canvas is there, we were already using that. Some information on Cultura. One of the things that they are advising and doing, especially because our students are now stretched all over the world, is to do those in recorded sessions so that they can access them through their own time zones, instead of necessarily doing live broadcasts, so that people can not have to be awake at 5 o'clock in the morning doing their lessons on the other side of the world. We have that, again, that emergency service on campus. You can see some of the different scenarios that they have prepared in advance for, where they then have various videos and tutorials on how to handle each one of those situations and the resources available. So fortunately we had something to sort of fall back and rely on. I was telling Vladimir, I was in a meeting last August and someone mentioned this Keep Teaching thing and all these contingencies. And I'm sort of like, yeah, like we'll need that. It's nice to have, we'll never, and 6 months later, there it is. I was wrong and we certainly needed it, and I'm glad to have it in place.
But that's really good and great that you have so many plans for any situation which could be happened or never happened, and you're ready for current situation. Dear colleagues, do you have something similar at your universities? So I see that American universities be better ready than us. Okay, let's continue to other questions. I would like to discuss in details the policies of university. What are university policies in the current situation? And I would like to give a floor to my colleague, Mrs. Viola, and she will tell a bit about our Ural Federal University. Okay, so please.
Oh, thank you, Vladimir. As I have already said, we consult all the full-time classes, including lectures, practical training, and even laboratories. They have virtual analogs and transfer them to an online environment. We have a rich experience in online learning because for a long time, approximately 10 years, we developed online learning technologies and implemented them in our educational process. But the situation now is different because in an extremely short period, lecturers were forced to organize their classes using distant learning technologies based on various methods of delivering electronic content, accessible communication tools for students and teachers, platforms, digital services, and so on. Under these conditions, all possible resources of our university, partner universities, external online platforms were used to conduct the educational process via the internet. The most important requirements the chosen system were the reliability, sufficient internet channel capacity, the simplicity for creating and posting content, and availability of services and platforms to teachers and students. Following the methodological recommendation of the Ministry of Science and Higher Education, which were published in March, on the 17th of March, as I remember, УrФУ has developed different scenarios of remote teaching and online learning. We worked out our requirements for educational process that are accessible to our level of IT infrastructure development and fit to available internal and external resources. Institute of our university has chosen its own set of tools and scenario of organizing remote training. The most popular among our lecturers were LMS platforms, Hypermethod, Moodle for posting content and testing student knowledge. A webinar platform such as Zoom, as I see in the US university, Google Meet, Skype for online lectures and consultation. Social networks and messengers for communication between students and teachers, and email for content delivery. All students are able to take advantages of free online courses from leading Russian and international foreign universities hosted on the national platform of online learning and international platforms such as Coursera and edX. Being a provider of 52 online courses on the national platform of open education and 6 courses on edX.org platform, Ural Federal University offers them for students of other universities. And now about 7,000 people study online using our courses free of charge. To help our lecturers and staff to implement distant learning, we undertook the following measures. First of all, a hotline for supporting faculties and students was organized. Recommendation and a plan for the transition to distant teaching and online learning has been developed. Then we worked out instructions for using different tools, services, and platforms, and all the information is available on the website of the university. And the whole list of more than 4,000 disciplines that are delivered this semester and online resources for each of them was compiled. One-button studios for producing video lectures and special rooms for delivering webinars were equipped. And we helped our lecturers to choose online courses for the disciplines and students to sign and take a course free of charge. But not all lecturers are ready for such cardinal restructuring of the educational process and using online courses. It is due to different level of digital competencies and available electronic educational resources. It was shown in one research conducted in 2019 by High School of Economics, Moscow, that university academic staff do not highly, approximately 3.2 out of 5, evaluate their skills of using distant teaching technologies, and every fourth of them has not used webinar platforms and services for video calls or for attending webinars during the last 3 years. In this case, our technical services play an important role in the implementation of new technologies. They develop standard solutions and accompany motivated lecturers. We conduct webinars and online consultation for those who need additional information or support in organizing online teaching. Sharing our experience in online teaching and learning is one of the most important goals of our granted project, Digital University, which UrFU was won in 2019. And now we work out different digital services, digital organizing models to show other universities how to implement these technologies in their educational process. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Ms. Viola. Am I right that in our Russian case, we have quite many different kinds of universities. There are federal, state, private, and so on. And not all of them have their own online courses. And there is a national platform where all online courses from different universities are united. And right now, in current situation of coronavirus, it was decided that all these online courses could be used by any Russian university, any Russian student on free of charge conditions, just to incorporate these online courses in the architectural of educational process. So I guess it's like a feature of Russian specific of remote education.
I could say that in response of the global challenge of rapidly developing online education, in September 2015, the National Open Educational Platform was launched. And this project created by efforts of 8 leading national universities with the support from the Ministry of Science and Higher Education aims to increase the pace of development of educational technologies in Russian education. And these 8 leading universities, including Ural Federal University, and now they are 11 universities, they created courses, and now we have approximately 550 online courses. They are available on this platform, and now they are available for all students of all Russian universities. They are free of charge during coronavirus pandemic, and any university can submit an application through the portal Modern Digital Education Environment of the Russian Federation by selecting the desired course in the catalog. And we launch special sessions for students of these universities and gave a possibility to conduct asynchronous automatic proctoring while delivering exams. And students have access to all courses content and will be given 2 attempts to pass the final test. The 24/7 technical support is organized on the platform, and after finishing online courses by students, the university will be provided with information on students' learning outcomes. And that is why we teach not only our students, we teach students of different universities, approximately 20 universities all over Russia.
Okay, thank you. So colleagues, maybe you can explain some features of policies at your university right now in current situation. So who want? Just okay, please, Ken.
I find the Russian situation very interesting, that you have a national portal that any student in any university can access the courses for free. It's a good idea. When I look at in the Irish situation, we have 2 types of higher education institutes. There is the research universities, and there are institutes of technology, and I would represent the institutes of technology. The research universities have more experience of the online teaching, and so they have policies and so on developed. They have an Institute of University Alliance where they actually work together to actually share their policies and development online. Within the institutes of technology, it is a slightly different situation. And we are actually looking at merging with some other institutes to become a technical university. And so we've been developing our policies along those lines. So when the coronavirus issue came along, it's sort of put a spanner in the works, so to say. And because we didn't have policies to address a situation like coronavirus. And so our own adaptation of it is that we put together a rapid training program for staff to upskill them. The main system that we would use is Blackboard. We've been using Blackboard and WebCT beforehand. And so majority of staff are familiar with Blackboard, but only in a blended approach, and also to support face-to-face teaching. Our online teaching programs were all postgraduate. And so to introduce it to the undergraduate side of things was a little bit more tricky. And so that's why when I said earlier that we did not really have strong policies, it was basically adapting as we move along. And so the use of Collaborate, that's the video conferencing basically within Blackboard, with some discussion boards, were promoted most strongly. But a number of teachers also felt that they should deliver their standard timetable. And so they would deliver a 2-hour lecture and then expect students to attend another 2-hour lecture straight afterwards. Of course, that is not what online is about, or even remote teaching. So a lot of lessons being learned by staff. Many staff were quite reluctant, afraid of using it for the first time, maybe because of embarrassment and so on. But also in Ireland, we have the added issue that working remotely means using broadband. And well, Ireland is a rural country. Majority of population live in the city of Dublin and 2 or 3 other cities, but many people live in the hills and so on, and they do not have good internet access. And in fact, we found that many academics who are working from their homes also had very poor internet access as well. So very quickly, we had to learn to scale back. That if you were going to have videos, have them on YouTube so that they can link in and download them at their leisure and so on. And so the real discussions around pedagogy didn't really take place because there wasn't time for it to take place. So that's why we're calling it an emergency remote teaching scenario, because people are still using the same pedagogies as used for face-to-face, just slightly adapted because they're now teaching it through Blackboard Collaborate or something like that, or even maybe using Zoom. And so the actual engagement for students and so forth is very difficult for people to work out, is this really successful or not? And also with how do we assess this process? For instance, my subjects, I teach mathematics. I also teach automation, but the automation subject is 100% skills-based. They have to be in a laboratory working with the hardware and so on. And so it's how we actually work with that. I've been in discussions with colleagues in Finland and also in other colleges as well about how they deliver the remote teaching of hardware-based subjects. And unfortunately, in many cases, it means that a person has to be in the laboratory to keep machines stocked and so on. And so it has real problems for myself. I can simulate things, but if they want to visualize the hardware, it's a totally different story altogether. So the pedagogies, they're all contextually different. We have nursing, we have engineering, we have business studies, and so on. Each scenario requires a different pedagogical approach. You need a different design and so on. And so the support for that is something that we will have to basically discuss afterwards. We don't really have time to discuss it now because people are just doing it day by day just to get through until the end of semester. So, but as I said to you about the different structure in the Irish situation, we also have a National Institute for Digital Learning. And so they have put together some programs which have been shared with staff, with academics within Ireland, irrespective of which type of organization you actually were employed in. And so some people have benefited from that as well. But there's much more work to be done yet. So there is. Yeah. To give you an idea, my college, I only have 3,000 students. So we are a rural college, so we are. But our catchment area is quite large, but it is very, very rural. We have fishing villages, we have the hills and forests and so on. And so it can be quite difficult to contact people and to ensure that they're able to work online. So it is. Some of the internet speeds, you're talking maybe 100 kilobits per second. Whereas me, I have 250 megabits per second because I live in the city. So you can see the problems.
I see. Thank you, Ken. But you inspired me for asking two important questions. First one about practice and labs. How to arrange this work on remote way. I know that Kyle have some case and could explain how they arrange labs in chemistry. Am I right, Kyle? Could you tell us a bit about practice and labs at your university? How you arrange this education on remote way?
Right, and it's going to vary a lot by as Ken was mentioning, there are many different scenarios, and we have many different schools within the university that are going to have different policies, and each course is going to, in many ways, have to figure out how to get through getting the information they need out to students. Just an example from a lab course, which again, as Ken mentioned, sort of involves someone being physically present in a lab. But for example, chemistry is doing things like having a pre-lab assignment, having someone in the lab to record the experiment that they're doing the lesson about, sending the data that's generated from that experiment to the student, and then the student doing a lab write-up based on viewing the experiment and the results, the data that's generated, and getting graded, for example, on that lab write-up. We have a large school of music, which also comes with challenges with online, because of course it's not all just lecture-based. There's a lot of performance-based. So lessons are being conducted online. Our music school said one of their biggest issues with that was piano majors, because not everybody has a piano in their house or apartment that they can just use to practice on in online lessons. So the university bought or purchased or rented electronic keyboards that best simulated a real piano with the keys, and had those sent to the students who needed them. So there are all kinds of interesting ways to work around or try to get the educational level up to as close as it can be in such a quick transition from in-person to remote. I know that the performance-based courses where they might be Large groups are now requiring instructors to do one-on-one sessions for those, and recitals, which are required for graduation in some performance degrees, are, instead of performing the live recital, they are having their professor need to certify that they're prepared, that if a recital was possible, that they would be prepared for that. And that's sort of how they're doing the music component of verifying that they are at the skill level needed to pass a recital. So there's just a lot of variation. I think Dave can probably speak to more hands-on what's happening in the classrooms, because he works very closely with instructors.
Okay, thank you. So we have quite many questions in our chat. Maybe I will announce them just to answer. So Yana asks, good day, dear colleagues. Do you think online remote education influence on the quality of education? And if yes, how? So who wants to answer? Okay, Viola, please.
I think that it is the ordinary question for such situation, but I have already said that we should the difference between remote and online teaching and learning in the emergency situation, and planning process of online learning with the help of special online courses designed on the basis of pedagogical rules and so on. I think that we can say that the quality of such education as now is lower than in face-to-face learning, but we can't say spread this statement to online learning, because there are many researches conducted by different researchers from different countries, and they showed that online learning can be even more effective than traditional. We conducted such experiment, involved 5 Russian universities, and we compare 5 models of online learning, blended, exclusively online, online as additional material for face-to-face learning, and different models between such basic models. And we could show that there is no statistically significant difference between the students' learning outcomes in these models. It depends on the quality of online course, maybe. We call different electronic resources as online course, but they are so different. That's why I think that in nowadays situation, we can't judge about the online learning, about the ordinary process of online learning. It is emergency situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Celia wrote that online education needs defined. Distance learning is different from emergency remote teaching. Okay, let's discuss this because it's really an issue. Please, Celia. Microphone, please. Switch on microphone.
Apologies. I take the point that was made by Bruno so well, that there is a variance in models. And this is something that we're working on, both Ken and I, actually interstate, because Northern Ireland and Ireland are 2 different provinces with a whole lot of regulatory difficulties in terms of history and past, and also simply in terms of the policies that exist in regulating, I suppose, higher education. And Ken's gone some way to explain how the technical universities model is grappling with this, and potentially could break new ground in this area, hence our work together. But one of the things that I've been working for over 20 years in the area of e-pedagogy, and a lot of my own work and colleagues alongside myself was in higher education, but it did start in the technical side of things, working with very much institutes of what we call in Northern Ireland further education, post-16 education, if you like. And so I could see very clearly at an early stage that the transition of the young person and the journey really of the learner coming through is what's important. And I'm underlining that term quality that Brona used, because there is a lot of bad practice out there internationally, not just nationally. And so in higher education in particular, but further in higher as it is in Northern Ireland, connected together very much so, it's vitally important that we have the right model. And so not all subjects or disciplines will, nor should they perhaps, lend themselves to 100% online. Many of them may value what you might call a wraparound model, and that's a well-researched pedagogy, where you have this new term blended learning emerging. And there's different definitions even of that, but effectively the crisis that we're in at the moment. And in many ways, I have to say, perhaps off the record first, it's quite frustrating for people who've worked in this area like ourselves for a long, long time. And I talk to colleagues locally and nationally quite a bit in research circles. And one of the things we've said is we've worked for so long to encourage online pedagogy, and all of a sudden we're very popular and everybody wants to know everything that we have learned. And notwithstanding this group necessarily, but it's a little bit frustrating that we're perhaps being dragged into it, or they are being dragged into it with their students for all the wrong reasons. On the opportunity side of that, of course, there is learning, and coming out of that, we would hope that we'll have a lot more, I suppose, value placed on pedagogy that is emerging for remote teaching and learning. But remote teaching and learning is not necessarily an e-pedagogy. We need to hold tight on that, because a quality e-pedagogy is going to not just simulate something for the sake of it, like Ken's laboratory or practical work explanation earlier. It's for the good of it. And that's something quite different. So it's about each practitioner, whether they're academic in a research university or whether in a further and higher education institute. It doesn't really matter. It's about the quality of the pedagogy fitting the needs of the discipline. And that's something that our practitioners, sadly, internationally, haven't all had the opportunity to explore, as Ken has said. And we don't want that to take over the ground of e-pedagogy, and something I'm working very hard on. In Northern Ireland, just to give you an example of the level, although I imagine it's exactly the same for you guys internationally, listening to your stories, I think I can share a screen. If I show you a screen, this website had to be put up almost overnight, 48 hours I think we had. And this is a very, you might say in terms of university scope and scale, this is a small city-based, Belfast is where we're at, Stranmillis University College. It's a college of Queen's University, which is the biggest university in Northern Ireland. In fact, it's one of the competing universities in Great Britain from a research point of view. But we would have about 1,000 students, all training to be either teachers or allied professionals. And this course was put together by, you might call, our quality pedagogists, who really wanted to help. Within 48 hours, there was 1,000 applicants across Northern Ireland had signed up for this remote learning course. So that should give you, and Northern Ireland, as Ken has said, alongside Ireland, is quite a rural, small enterprise in terms of other nations. And we pride ourselves on that, but 1,000 students, all of which are teachers in our schools province-wide, have signed up for this. and I'm going to have the pleasure of working with them. But the focus is very much on quality, and them trying to influence and inform best or better practice, as opposed to going down the road of a quick fix, you might say, in the time of crisis.
Thank you. May I ask the same question to you, Celia, about online remote education and influence on the quality of education? And do you have any online courses, quality assessment system? Do you have any online courses, quality assessment system?
We offer it within this. I don't know if you can still see that screen share, can you? You can, yeah. Within this, you'll see that this has been put together very quickly, obviously, in the crisis, to try and support regionally our schools in Northern Ireland. And I'm talking about what you might call elementary school, or let me see, anything from nursery, primary, from the age really of preschool up to further and higher education. And indeed, many of the people who have enrolled in this course are coming from the organisations and institutes that Ken mentioned, his own included, Letterkenny Institute. So there's an interest in our own teaching environment as well as in the schools. But one of the areas, as you can see there, if you can see it with my cursor, I haven't used Zoom enormously. We use Big Blue Button, but assessment is a big thing. And I very quickly, when I'm teaching in this area, and I'm just one of many researchers in this area who would support the principle that you must focus your tools in on the pedagogy. It's not about the tools, it's about the pedagogy. And so if it's about the pedagogy across each discipline, you have to dissect it almost into what makes good teaching, what makes good learning, and what makes good assessment. And so that's exactly what we've done in this course. This course has really just been unpacked and taken out of one of our master's courses in Northern Ireland. So the content behind this course is very much already there, albeit we're condensing it into a smaller time frame for the crisis that we're in. But we have a master's degree on e-pedagogy, which is linked to our Master of Teaching and Leadership in Northern Ireland, like many other institutes. But the big thing that's different, and you've used the term as we are at the moment, webinar. We talk about e-seminars, because if you talk about webinar, you're talking about a meeting tool. And webinar has bad press out there. I mean, we talk about teaching hundreds of people on a webinar. That's not teaching, that's meetings or talking or lecturing, whatever you want to call it. So e-seminars are what we call them. If you have an e-lecture, it's pre-recorded. That works best in terms of research excellence. And of course, e-assessment is something that is disputed in many disciplines. So there are variants of things there. I mean, I myself this week carried out an evaluation on a master's degree, which would be usual for this time of year, with many practitioners. And those practitioners are in the middle of this crisis themselves with their own student populations. Across the schools, across further and higher education, they're from different disciplines. Many are in international schools, interestingly, studying with us at Stranmillis online. And all of them said that the tool that they liked using the most was the pre-recorded e-lectures, so they could go backwards and forwards in the lecture. And they also liked the very practical nature of the e-seminar, which is really a webinar tool like Zoom. But they can go into groups and they can work on practical projects and so on. So it is always about the pedagogy. The crisis really shouldn't be pulling us down a road that we don't want to go. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded, perhaps.
Okay, thank you. It's really interesting. And I guess that people need time to investigate your proposals and suggestions. Okay, let's.
Yeah, if I could just jump in for a moment, I'd like my colleague Dave to sort of address. We are we are a university, just some context, of about 100,000 system-wide and about 43,000, I think, on our main campus where Dave and I are both located. And so we have most of our students, I think, in a normal day and week will have a mix of online and in-person courses. In fact, we have a lot of hybrid courses, which are within the course itself, a mix of in-person and online. So I think that could also be helping inform how we're transitioning to remote education. So I think Dave could probably speak really well to how already having a system of online courses and hybrid courses then might be helping the faculty make this transition and how that informs that. Dave?
Sorry. Yeah, you know, we were fortunate that Indiana University has spent 20 or 25 years trying, you know, planfully and as a primary goal of our university system to be to lead whenever we have the opportunity in online education and in technology as it relates to a large research university's operations in general. And you know, that focus, while it has sometimes presented challenges over the decades, has also given us a head start over some of our colleagues now at other research universities in the United States. And you know, we have both a university-wide organization dedicated to online learning that is staffed both by technologists and lecturers and pedagogy folks, in addition to you know, to allied staff and supporting folks who, as Celia said, have dedicated years to both developing pedagogy and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And so now, as all of our courses are somewhat hurriedly going online, as with all of yours, that's given us a head start. You know, we had websites in place, we had support systems in place, in addition to just faculty that other faculty can ask, hey, what are you doing with this online program? What have you been doing? There are more formal systems in place to take pedagogy online for existing courses that folks want to take online. So, you know, we have undergraduate degrees that are all online master's programs, et cetera. And so that's informed us some, what works, what doesn't. And in terms of assessment, you know, that's certainly running the gamut right now, as some people are seeking support for assessment and hopefully are getting that guidance. Other folks are, I attended a PhD defense the other day for a doctoral candidate, you know, and I found that it was incredibly typical of our normal in-person doctoral defenses for someone in his department. It didn't really change what he had going on there much. So anyway, I hope that those support structures in place, plus as Ken said, not doing something for the sake of making it an analogy to what we have in the real world. Some of those programs are changing a lot. Some of them are not changing much, but our faculty do feel supported, I hope. Although I've certainly met a few individuals who might have felt frustration. Our faculty do feel supported by that system that was already in place there. And, you know, we already had licensing agreements university-wide with Zoom, with Canvas, and even our residential courses were we're mostly using Canvas and the tools associated with Canvas. And, you know, our Zoom instances and Kaltura and backend are linked. So we really had most of the underpinnings for successful transition to distance learning where necessary and without trying to confuse those terms in place. And so really the push when we moved everything online was to help support faculty who might not be as used to it and to give good advice. As Celia noted, telling people that, hey, if you're going to lecture, pre-recording is the way to go. Don't try to do it live. And as Kyle noted, our students are spread out in every possible time zone. So it was not going to function well in a live format, although for some classes, obviously, that's the way to go, as long as everyone has agreed and arranged through the professor on the time that is. And as Kyle noted earlier, trying not to overload anyone with multiple hour or 2 hour or 3 hour lectures in a single day. Thanks.
So, colleagues, you ask very interesting questions in our chat, but unfortunately, our viewers can't see. So please ask questions in a live way. I know that Ken would like discuss some questions about reorganization of online system due to current situation, and about some competition and leadership between different universities. So Ken, maybe you can comment.
Well, actually, Vladimir, I was hoping that Celia would maybe take the gauntlet on this one, because this is whenever we were talking earlier and I says about bringing Celia in, this is one of the areas where I like to listen to what she has to say. So if you don't mind, maybe we'll get Celia to look at leadership and so on here. Yeah.
If I can apologize in advance for my passion in this area, because I am new to it, and I would have liked perhaps to shake your hands and to meet you rather than come in over a video like this. Learning leadership in Northern Ireland is something that we're working on. We know the terms transformative leadership, which internationally are batted about. But in teacher education, which is my background, we don't particularly use, but we don't like the term lecture. And there's a reason for that, because it's not necessarily the best way to teach. And lots of you will dispute or disagree with that. It's about that connectivity with the students or the learners, depending on the age. And it's also very importantly about reaching out. And that evaluation that I did recently with a group of online learners, 100% online, they had also had experiences of modules at master's level where they had been either blended, 50%, we might say online, 50% face-to-face, and or they had what I would call a wraparound model, which is about 75% face-to-face, 25% supported online library and things like that, maybe a discussion forum. So there are a range of models. And those students were of great interest to me. And whilst it was an evaluation of a course at the end of the day, so it's anecdotal evidence, it does back up the research in this area, that whilst there doesn't seem to be, as I think Brona said earlier, a significant difference in people's experience in terms of attainment, because they usually are at postgraduate level and they commit to learning and so on. But there was an interesting comment, and there is interesting research that would back up the idea that if it is quality pedagogy, it is more likely to happen online. And that's a scary thought for us working in further and higher education, that this lecture model is being grappled with or challenged. And hence, Dave, my idea that you can't have a lecture if it is true lecture style of an hour plus, recorded and really expect learning to happen, because we all know how much we learn from listening, and it's not as much as you would want if you have interaction. So it's not saying that there isn't a place for content like that in an e-learning environment or an online education environment. It's just not the best way to learn. We need other things. So the seminar methodology of old is coming back into higher education, and a very welcome addition. And that group that I evaluated recently, it was interesting that the students who had studied face-to-face recently on their masters and had experience of blended all preferred what we would call the webinar tool with a structured lesson plan, which is really a seminar modality. and method because they felt that they got the chance to speak over and above what might happen in a traditional lecture. And so they're reaching out and connecting in a different way. And that's something we want to really hold tight, that online pedagogy works, but it has to be quality pedagogy. And so our learning leaders in this area, my own included, are now looking at this very seriously. And it isn't just content online anymore, it is teacher presence, lecturer presence online. And that includes assessment. If we really truly want pedagogy to have an assessment that is electronic, we need the teacher presence. It can't be something that happens without the teacher. That's my view.
Yes, please, Ken, feel free. Just switch on microphone if you have.
Yeah, I would just like to continue where Celia has left off. I would like to continue with the assessment side of things. One of the problems with assessment is that many of our students are not what I would call digitally literate before they come to third level education. They may be aware of their social media tools and so on, but they're not aware of the tools that we would use in education. And using them in a digital format can be quite strange for them. And one of the issues about the assessment is that whenever we look at assessment online, we find that the assessment is not a dialogue, but mainly it's actually in many cases it's a monologue that a lecturer or an academic will give what they call feedback. In other words, a message or even just a grade or some small comments. But with our very, very tight programs nowadays, the module approach, where we're delivering things within 12 weeks or so, there is no scope or very, very little scope for a dialogue for the student to actually reflect and come back to the academic and discuss the assessment and actually demonstrate their learning from that. And so we're not actually closing the circle. In many cases, we're actually just sending out shoots, but we're not actually waiting to see what happens until the summative assessment, the end of term examination. And so what we talk about in terms of learning, are we actually really, really assessing what it is we set out to teach in the first place? Or are we just trying to make sure that we meet our goals, that at week 13, students will get at least a pass in this subject? But really, have they learned? Very good question. So we need more dialogue. There has to be a meta dialogue established, and students actually have to understand the meaning of assessment. It's very difficult them understanding it face to face. It's even harder for them to understand it in an online scenario as well. So that's what I wanted to say about this dialogue. We need to be able to bring this in somehow. And again, it comes back to what Celia is saying about the pedagogy. Without the pedagogy, we don't really have anything. And so it comes back to our design. And so we have a knee-jerk reaction at the moment. Yeah, that's fine. But we have to be very careful now as to how the senior executives of our institutions view this, because they may think this is the fix-all, the panacea. Yes, we've got it. Let's do it from now on. But we really need much more teacher presence as well as student presence. Both voices need to be heard in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. So any other ideas, comments? If not, I would like to ask questions from our viewers about international cooperation under Corona conditions. So what's happened right now at your universities if you have some staff student mobility or any international conferences? Will you transfer these events on remote way, or you just cancel it. Please, few words briefly about your plans in international cooperation. Maybe, yes, please.
I had several programs which have all been cancelled. They're involved actually with the Ekaterinburg and also in Porto for June, and there was one for July as well, but they have been cancelled rather than put online. I've witnessed some others which have gone online, and they've been quite successful, but they were small events, so they were. But I think people are afraid that if we have a large event, how do we manage it? And so I think people are just saying, look, we have so much other things to do at this moment in time. Let's put these off until later.
We're in the same boat as Ken.
Okay, Dave.
We're doing the same thing as Ken is. You know, as Ken has said, we had several academic conferences and workshops scheduled for this spring, and all of those, almost all of those, have just been canceled, with maybe some very small events transferred to being online events. Additionally, our university hosts a large number of camps during the summer for academics, sports, and some things that are only related by needing our space. And I believe all of those have been canceled too through July. Though, you know, we're certainly all talking about that we can't cancel workshops and conferences indefinitely either. And that as our precautions extend and as staying at home extends at some point, at least certain conferences, certain types of workshops will need to be planned online. But at the same time, you know, canceling what was already there gives everyone the opportunity to do so planfully, to change panels as needed, to change presentation style as needed, etc., in order to still make it a valuable and seemingly put together conference instead of hastily reorganized. So we have the luxury now of having several months to plan those things. And, you know, it's also going to be somewhat easier, I think most people will find, to, once they've decided on an online format, I think it will actually be somewhat easier to schedule the conference, simply because none of us are beholden to the challenges of scheduling large venues and the limited number of large venues within any campus or organization or city. So, you know, I think a lot of our schools have really been battling for space for years, and that the number of conferences and things and workshops we can hold, there's less of them because of that. And so we'll see if this extends into the fall, what we see going forward with events. But I suspect that we might see more small events simply because we aren't battling for space. Anyway, thank you.
Maybe,
yes, please, Viola.
I will give some comments. It's a pity, but we had to consult our favorite conference at Ural. It's a very big conference for more than 500 people and participants, and for which includes more than 40 events, which is conducted simultaneously, seven events simultaneously. For the first time, when coronavirus came to us, we tried to transfer this conference to online and plan to conduct it with the help of webinar platform. But when we learned that the entrance to the university would be forbidden, it was very big problem to organizers, because when the technical specialists sit in different places, it takes much time to communicate between them. That's why we had to consult the conference, but now we are going to choose a new prolonged format for this conference. Maybe during a month or 2 months, we are going to conduct different events of this conference in a webinar format. And I invite you to take part in this conference. I will be very glad to see you as the key speakers of our conference. I will inform you by email. Thank you very much for your nice comments, speeches, and your rich experience.
Celia, would you like to add something? No?
Yeah, Stranmillis, as a college, teacher education college of Queen's University, have quite a big international school, and because we have a city-based campus founded on a lot of, I suppose, cultural challenges of the last century, there's usually a lot of visitors at this time of the year right through to the summer. So obviously quite a significant amount of that has been postponed, is the word we use, as opposed to cancelled. And we welcome our visitors back and our students. All students have been accommodated and supported either by staying in Belfast, some have chose to do that, or they have gone home safely, thankfully. And I know that they are still availing, like our regional students, of all our online pedagogy. So there certainly remains that contact and link. But like Dave and Ken and of course Brona, you know, things have been postponed with a view to passing by some of this crisis point.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of moved right from, everything is sort of shifting from in the middle of March when all this hit, we were managing what's happening now. So it was very much urgent, what's happening now. Late March, early April, we sort of moved into, okay, what's happening for the summer? And now we're all sort of transitioning to, okay, what happens beyond the summer? But our international agreements and exchanges sort of follow our current international student and exchange population is still able to be here in the US in our college town here of Bloomington, or taking their classes remotely. So we sort of have a mix. We did a survey of our international student population, and about 65%, well, about 80% responded, which anyone knows working with students is not a terrible response rate. About 65% of those have chosen to remain in our campus location in the college town. I think about 7% have gone somewhere else in the United States, but are continuing their study here remotely. And so that remainder has indicated that they've departed the US and are still continuing their courses remotely. So almost everyone has remained enrolled for our current semester, our entire international student and exchange population. We've had almost no one drop out or remove their enrollment for this semester. I know some of our international students who are doing study abroad programs through the university. So they're an international student with us, but they are currently in a third country doing their study abroad. It's sort of a mix. Some of those programs continued online, so they're completing those programs through online remote education. And some of them were ended and they've come back to the US or gone back to their countries of citizenship. I think our summer programs, we've mostly, our summer exchange programs are largely off. And then fall is what everybody's looking at now. The US government isn't probably going to allow us to bring in new international students, newest students when courses are all done remotely and not in person. So the continuing students, the government has made an allowance where they, even though courses are remote, even though the US government typically has a very strict requirement that international students have to be in residence in-person classes, they have made the exception that current students and continuing students can remain in the US and maintain their immigration status in the US with remote work. But what we probably won't be seeing is them letting new students come into the US just for remote work. So we're looking at potentially starting students, depending on how the fall goes, potentially starting some new students with online coursework from their home country location, and then bringing them into the country as soon as in-person courses resume, or even a mix in the fall semester if we resume in-person courses on campus, but some of our international students for reasons abroad can't get visas, US visas in time or enter in time, sort of perhaps a hybrid mix where some of the people who might otherwise be eligible to come take in-person classes start with remote and online coursework. And then again, once they're able to get those visas, then join us in person as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. So, dear colleagues, I guess we need to finalize our meeting because we discussed quite many questions, and it was really useful for me, for example. So let's hope for the best. I would like continue communicate with you in some questions about online educations, remote educations, and I hope that we could find solutions, decisions according to our challenges, which we could face right now. So thank you, and see you next time. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.
Nice to meet you all.
You too.
Let's see.
Yeah.